Hello and welcome back to my channel. I'm Helen and today I'm going to be sharing book recommendations based on some books that are popular on Booktube. So some of these books are popular on Booktube, some I think are just popular in general, but I've chosen them and I have recommendations for other books you could read if you liked that book. I've tried to choose quite a wide range of books, so there's something for everyone. Please let me know down below if you've read any of the books either that I recommend or that I base the recommendations off and what you thought of them. And I really hope you enjoyed this video. So the first book on my list is a classic and it is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. If you enjoyed Pride and Prejudice, which I know a lot of people did, I really cannot recommend enough Evelina by Burney. Evelina is such an amazing book. It's an epistolary novel, so it's written entirely in letters, and we follow Evelina, who goes to London for her first ever season. It's really funny and it's an incredibly sharp look at class in the 18th century, which is why I think if you enjoyed Pride and Prejudice and the humour in Pride and Prejudice, you'd probably enjoy Evelina. In London, we have Evelina, but we also have several gentlemen. So we have Sir Clement Willoughby, who's incredibly rakish, and for any fans of Wickham out there. And then we have Lord Orville, who is more for fans of Mr. Darcy. He's the standard sort of gentlemanly man. I guess more for fans of Mr. Bingley than Mr. Darcy though. I really love this book and I think it is so underappreciated, so I really recommend it. I know Clara from the Bookworm of Notre Dame, I'll link her channel down below of course. I know that she really loved it and honestly I just cannot recommend it enough. This book is so delightful to read, it's so funny. It's a much earlier view of society than the one we get in Pride and Prejudice and other Austen novels because Burney was writing much earlier. I just really recommend this book. So I should say most of the books I'm choosing that I'm recommending books off are books I really enjoy, and the next one is no exception, and it is The Secret History by Donna Tartt. The Secret History follows Richard, who goes to an incredibly prestigious university, and while there he meets a very strange and mysterious group of classic students who drag him into this really murky and very messed up world of constantly greying morality. A book that I would really recommend if you enjoyed this is The Rehearsal by Kacen. The Rehearsal is also quite dark and mysterious. It isn't set at a university, or a lot of it isn't set at a university. Most of it's set at a girls' school in New Zealand. And essentially in this book we have a sex scandal. A student is caught having sex with the music teacher, which catapults the school into local, if not national, awareness. And we follow the younger sister of the student who's been caught having sex with the music teacher and a local theatre college which decides to put on a play based on this scandal. This book again looks at morality. It also looks at rumour, the way that private and public interact. It's also really interesting because we have several characters in this who are never named. So we have scenes with them in, but we never receive their names. She's always known as the saxophone teacher, which I found was a really interesting stylistic device. Well, this book was incredibly popular and then the author of it showed her true colours on Twitter, I guess, and Instagram. And I think it's less popular now, but I thought I'd give you some recommendations. So the book is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzi Lee. This is the first of 3 books in the Montague siblings books, and we follow Monty, who is going out on his grand tour of Europe with his best friend slash crush, and it goes horribly wrong. This book is so much fun, so I tried to think of books that was kind of set in the same time period, had the same mix of fantasy and historical fiction, and I came up with 2. The first is A Natural History of Dragons by Mary Brennan. In this we follow Lady Trent, who is obsessed with dragons, and this is set in a world where dragons exist and dragons are incredibly real, and Lady Trent loves them and her main goal in life is to be a dragonologist. The other book I'm going to recommend is another book I adore, and that is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, which is the first book of 3 in the Athena Club series. In The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, we follow Mary Jekyll after her mother has just died. Her father is the renowned Dr. Jekyll who died many years before, and Mary is forced to deal with the consequences of being an orphan and having to look after her staff when she is incredibly low on funds. However, one day she is going through her family's accounts and she finds a mysterious amount of money going to a mysterious place. And she goes there and she finds a girl called Diana Hyde, who is apparently her younger sister. And the story takes off from there. This book has so many either characters from beloved Victorian novels or the daughters or female characters of those novels that are shoved to one side. So we do have characters like Sherlock Holmes and John Watson in this series, but we also have, of course, Mary Jekyll, Diana Hyde, Catherine Monroe, Juliet Frankenstein, and Beatrice Rappaccini. And the characters are so amazing. I just love the series. It's so funny. The world is amazing. The stories are really good. I still haven't finished book 3 because I listened to them on audiobook, but they are great. And I really recommend, if you want the kind of adventure vibes that A Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue has, I really recommend trying this series. The audiobooks are amazing, but I feel like the physical books would be just as good, but a very different experience. So the next book is another book I don't actually own, but the next book I'm basing my recommendations off is Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda by Becky Albertalli. Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda is a book about Simon, who is gay but closeted, and one day he gets an email threatening to out him, and what follows is a story of blackmail. I again have 2 books that I would recommend if you liked Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda. One of them has been getting a lot of traction lately and it totally deserves it, and I'm going to start with that book because it's another book I think a lot of people should read, and that is Felix Ever After by Kacen Callender. Felix Ever After is about Felix, who is trans. He is currently at summer school before going on to his final year of high school. When one day he goes into summer school where he's studying art and goes into the gallery to find pictures of him before he transitioned with his dead name underneath, and obviously he is incredibly upset by it. He then starts getting anonymous messages from someone on Instagram dead naming him and harassing him, and he decides to try and find out who it is. This book is one of those books that is incredibly joyous in a way. Obviously elements of it are not, but the main message of this is that it doesn't matter if you're still searching for who you are, which I really loved, so that is one reason I adore this book. Also, Kacen Callender is just such an amazing writer. It was a really interesting book to read just in general. I loved all the characters. I loved the kind of group of characters. I guess this book has elements of found family, which was really great, but also it talked about talking to parents and parents being supportive, parents not being supportive, the entire myriad. I feel like it would be great for fans of Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda, but I didn't love Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda and I still love this, so I'd recommend it even if you didn't love that book. The other book I'm recommending for Simon vs. the Homo Sapiens Agenda is The Paper and Heart Society Read with Pride by Lucy Powrie. This is another quite new release and it's another book that I really love. In it we follow Olivia, who is going into year 11 in the UK, which is the year we do our GCSEs, the kind of big exams before you can choose to go on to do A-levels or go to an apprenticeship. And Olivia is very stressed about her GCSEs and she is determined to do well. She appears quite a perfectionist. On her first day of school, she goes into the library and discovers that in order to get books with LGBTQ+ themes, you have to now get your parents to sign a slip because someone's parents complained to the school that their child was bringing inappropriate material home with them. And Olivia is obviously horrified at this because, as she says, it could really stop students from discovering who they are by stopping them from reading various books. So she sets together Read with Pride, this organisation in the school who essentially begin by leaving books with LGBTQ+ themes out around the school so anyone could pick them up and read them. They also start an online campaign, including a section where people talk about why they read with pride. It's people talking about essentially how reading helped them discover their sexuality and how reading helped them learn who they were, which I really loved reading about. I really loved seeing these characters so happy in their selves and so happy in their identities. Okay, and up next we have another very popular book, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. The Song of Achilles is a retelling of the Iliad, focusing far more on Achilles and Patroclus's relationship, and it's a great book. I highly recommend it, but I thought I'd recommend another book if you love this one. And I know this is a book that Ashley from A Frolic Through Fiction loves, but I I read it earlier this year and also fell in love with it, and that is 1,000 Ships by Natalie Haynes. 1,000 Ships follows the lives of the women who are affected by the Trojan War, either on the Trojan side or on the Greek side. Obviously on the Trojan side, after the war ends, a lot of them are taken as slaves and they are treated horrifically. And then on the Greek side, we have women like Penelope who are staying at home, and Penelope's sections in this in particular are brilliant. I think this book has so many brilliant sections. I just loved it so much. I read this book in a day and I did not stop raving about it for a very long time, and I'm still raving about it. I really recommend you read this, especially if you enjoyed The Song of Achilles, The Silence of the Girls, Circe, any other books about women or characters from the ancient world. If you enjoyed things like the Iliad and the Odyssey, I recommend picking this up. It gives a very different approach to the war, and it not only talks about that war, but it also talks about women's role in every war and what happens to civilians in war. So the next book on my list is another book I talk about a lot on this channel, and that is The Diviners by Libba Bray. The Diviners follows Evie O'Neill, who is sent to New York in the 1920s in order to learn to behave herself after she disgraces herself in her hometown. So Evie goes to New York, where she discovers that her magical powers, because she is a diviner, could help her solve crimes. So the book I'd recommend is The Witches of New York by Amy McKay. This is set in 1880, so it's set about 40 years before The Diviners, but it has the same themes of witchcraft and magic. It's set in Manhattan and follows two witches who have just opened a tea shop, and they get an apprentice called Beatrice who's incredibly mysterious. She appears to be able to see and hear things that no one else can, and the two witches don't know how to deal with her, and they begin fighting over her when suddenly she disappears, just as venom towards witches is rising. And finally we have a book that I'm not really sure if it's popular on Booktube or just popular in general, but that is Neverwhere by Neil Gaiman. Neverwhere follows Richard Mayhew, who is a young businessman who is suddenly sucked into Under-London, a world that is like London but not quite, and he gets pulled on a magical adventure. If you've read Neverwhere and loved it, the book I would recommend is Kraken by China Mièville. Kraken is about, as you might be able to guess from the title, a kraken, and in it we follow Billy, who is a scientist at the Natural History Museum, and his pride and joy is the kraken in the centre of the Natural History Museum that unfortunately I don't believe exists, but he loves this creature and suddenly it is stolen. And a bit like in Neverwhere, he goes off on an adventure to find the kraken and to stop it from destroying London. Along the way he meets an amazing variety of people. This book has villains who actually are far nastier, at least in my opinion, than the villains in Neverwhere. It has the same sort of whimsy, but whimsy with an incredibly dark undertone that Neverwhere has, and I just think that if you enjoyed Neverwhere you would really enjoy trying Kraken. So there we have some of the books I would recommend based on other books. I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a like and maybe leave a comment letting me know which of these you've read, if you enjoyed any of them, if you didn't, what you thought of them in general. I really hope to see you in my next video. Bye!